Welcome back. We're trying another test. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Along with me, Tim Dennis. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Listen, man, exciting things are going. We've got a lot popping. I've been working on a super secret project for Travel Channel, and hopefully they'll be releasing that information soon. But keep watching Travel Channel updates, folks. You can follow them on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and find out what's going on. But we've got a couple of cool specials coming up that I'll be a part of. And I believe one is going to be airing possibly even this week. Oh. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We've got a lot of other cool things taking place as well. And looks like back on the road filming for the Holzer Files.
Nice.
So the world is opening, Tim.
That it is, yeah. Yeah.
Scary and opening, but it's opening slowly. We'll see what happens. Speaking of the Travel Channel and the world opening back up, the world is opening back up to us tomorrow, Tim. A brand new series debuts on the Travel Channel, Buried Worlds with Don Wildman.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, I had a chance to watch the first episode, and with my fascination in vampires, I love this kickoff episode, first of all. But the series looks fantastic, and we've been a fan of Mr. Wildman's for a while, of course, with Mysteries at the Museum and his other programs he's worked on. And he's joining us today for the first time ever on Darkness Radio. Don Wildman, Thank you for being here, sir.
Oh, it's very nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's great. I mean, the series kicks off tomorrow. You've got this first episode where you are out in search of information regarding vampire legend, lore, and belief systems. And, I first of all, I love the filming. It's beautifully done, beautifully shot, and the story thread is great. Were you surprised, though, I mean, going out into the world, 21st century, to realize that there are still cultures that don't just talk about this in the past as, part of our heritage, but still believe in these elements of the high strangeness and supernatural elements like vampires?
We're going to have a very good conversation right now because this entire series was a gigantic surprise to me anyway. Then we went out there and found amazing things that I'm not just saying that because I'm selling a TV show. I was not expecting anything that happened to me to happen to me. And it was one revelation after another all over the world. And the episode you're talking about is primarily Bulgaria. And it was, we went looking for, here's the thing, I got to back up here. First of all, can you hear me fine?
You're coming through great. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, I'm one of the millions in their, houses, not knowing if I'm really communicating. So listen, I've been with Travel Channel for a long time. And first of all, big fan of the Holzer Files, by the way.
Thank you.
And my job has been as a history guy. I was going to say historian, but I'm not a professional historian. That's my gig. Like, I visit worlds that I'm not an expert in and ask the questions that sort of ordinary people would ask in hopefully some sort of educated, tone of voice. So I was starting a new show with Travel, which was kind of in the line of other shows I've done in the past where we sort of went underground and did tunnels and stuff like that. And it was sort of on its way to being kind of a straight history show. And then things got changed up a lot. And so they wanted the show to become more of a paranormal investigation, which was a complete surprise to me. And I said, wow, that's interesting. I've always been really fascinated by the questions involved in this. And they get kind of heady. So just a warning, that's what I'm really curious about, is the kind of, weird philosophical and even theological questions involved in the paranormal. It's pretty heavy stuff. But this was about going out and trying to find the rituals and the people who actually still practice these things in the world. And there are tons of them, especially the cultures like Haiti and Peru, where we went, to all these sort of ancient places, these cultures with these huge ancient root systems, that have enormous cultural backlogs, that people can draw on, unlike here in America. So, yeah, it was all surprising to me, and it was very alive. And it wasn't what I expected, which was, I thought there would be kind of almost a quaintness to it, in terms of how we interacted with people. I thought people would be selling things. I thought they'd be sort of peddling ideas. It was the opposite. People are very passionate. People are very earnest and very authentic about what they're doing. By and large, of course, there were exceptions to the rule, but sure, I was totally surprised and delighted by the experience of learning an entirely different way of looking at the world, which is what I find so fascinating about it.
Buried Worlds with Don Wildman premieres on Travel Channel Monday, June 8th at 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. And it's a quest that flips the switch on the paranormal and the supernatural, shedding new light on the dark origin of legends and myths. And first of all, I got to tell you, as a guy who's been doing this for 14 years now on radio, I appreciate your tact in the way you dealt, especially in this first episode, with the people who have these beliefs. There's never that tongue-in-cheek roll of the eyes to the camera like, oh, my God, can you believe it? I love how you settle into the culture and are just more amazed and kind of drawn into their world as opposed to being an onlooker who's just hanging out with them. And the way they react to you seems very open, and I think that's what really led to some of the best scenes, was watching how comfortable they felt with you in showing you their practices, showing you their ideas, and not feeling like they were being made a fool of or shamed in their practices of vampire hunting and witchcraft and ghost, communication. You're along for that ride, and I love the fact that you're like, I didn't know what to expect when I came in here, but I'm really kind of getting freaked out. And I don't know if it's them psyching me out or the feeling of this location or that there's something here. And I love the fact that you weren't willing to just eliminate and say, oh, I'm just psyched out by these guys. You could tell by looking at you and watching you through the investigation that you're not quite sure what to believe about all of this. Well,
thank you for noticing. I do try to do that. I mean, you know what it's like. You meet people on the site often. You shake hands with people as you meet them. Sometimes these things have been arranged for you, and you pre-produce these segments, but sometimes you don't really know these people until you meet them and then proceed to spend more time with them than you spend with your aunt and uncle. It's like this incredible experience that you have that is so deep, especially in this world, that you become friends, you become, there's a relationship you have to strike up. So far be it from me to judge anybody in the world anyway, but certainly not someone who is coming from an entirely different view. I don't have much of this in my past. I mean, for better or worse, this has not been part of my life. I've never seen a ghost. I've never had paranormal experiences. I have been fascinated by them, as anybody is. It's an interesting world, even, without having done a television show about it. It's just a colorful and interesting world. But what interests me, in shooting a TV show about it are the human beings involved and their particular angle on these things. It's really kind of amazing how deep these subject matters go. And in order for someone to become an expert, they not only have to have an experience about it themselves, but also understand the history and the process and the rituals behind it all. And these people are very smart and very deep, still waters and all that stuff. And so I found myself in awe of the people I was hanging out with when I really didn't know what to expect. And this went for everybody. It was, in Bulgaria, we went around with a team of experts, these guys who actually make this part of their life, where they search out vampires, vampire things. Let's talk about that for a bit, because I think that's in the first show. Okay, so this is heavy duty stuff. There is a mountaintop village, which we've been told the GPS coordinates for, and off we go. Now, if anybody doesn't understand how TV is done, you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Your DP, your director of photography, sound guy, et cetera, this small group of you meet groggily in the lobby room of your motel. You know, they're not fancy places. And off you go in the car to some unknown spot. Well, in this show, in this series, these unknown spots are, we're meeting a vampire team. And you're like, I don't even know what these guys do, let alone, you know, are we expecting to find a vampire? I mean, these are literally the questions that are going around the car as we're driving along at 8 o'clock in the middle of nowhere in Bulgaria. And then sure enough, the coordinates lead us all the way up this winding road to a truly creepy mountaintop village. There's nobody there. It's abandoned. These are all 19th century hovels, farmhouse kind of things. You know, at some point there was some lively village up there that belonged to sheep herders or somebody like that. Well, the rumor is, and the thread we've pulled on here, is that there's a problem in the surrounding villages. They've been finding animals that have been slayed in the forest. They've been finding their animals getting sick and all this kind of stuff. And the rumor is that there's some sort of force up there, a malevolent force, which in this part of the world, Bulgaria, Romania, often gets called vampire. It's sort of a general term, I think. They didn't really, you know, we're not talking about Count Dracula here. We're talking about a dark force. So we have met these men, 3 of them, who come from Sofia area, I believe it was, and they drive up and meet us in this area. Totally delightful people, you know, completely different kinds of people. One guy's sort of a militaristic, sort of a tough
Right
guy.
now, I am just testing.
From this community. And they meet up and they have a whole bunch of rituals that they go through. And what we're doing in this village is we're trying to find evidence that there was truly something spiritual happening here, something paranormal happening. We meet at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's going to be a nighttime ritual. Together, we begin to move around the house as soon as it's dark.
Now, Donna, I want to ask you really quickly, though, when you get a chance to meet these guys and you're going vampire hunting, get the sense of how earnest someone is when you're talking. I mean, was there ever a sense that these guys were
making it up? No.
Not maybe even making it up, but just play acting as if, you know, I mean, no. This is something we're going to show the traveler. This isn't the real deal.
Nope. I can really tell you, because I certainly would have, you know, told that story many times of like, oh my God, you know, it was quite the opposite. These guys were very passionate about it. There was something, the only thing I can tell you that left me off balance was I never quite understood the entity we were searching for. I think I asked that several times, but I left with a more spiritual feeling than one of an actual, you know, body or an apparition or some sort of thing.
Right, and that was an interesting aspect because, again, having had such a fascination with vampire culture and lore, I liked that your show introduced a new aspect to this. And I don't want to give that away because, again, if I know our listeners are keen on this kind of programming, tune in. This is a newer version of the history and actually makes more sense to me regarding the concept of vampires than the original legend and lore that most of us are familiar with. But please go ahead.
Well, you've redirected me in thinking. I did a show about Dracula. I did 2 shows about Dracula from the historical perspective in 2 other series. And the one came, it was a Travel Channel show about 3 years ago. And we went to Romania, Transylvania, the sort of classic story of Vlad the Impaler and all that stuff. But as a bit of color, as a bit of backdrop, we went to a village and talked to very old people, some ancient people, elderly people, and about their opinions. And this was done through a translator. These were really just villagers. And we went through the one woman had said that her son had become a vampire. I can't remember the word for it. There was another term for it.
Go on.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. And we walked through a cemetery and we walked to her son's grave, and she told us the story about this happening and how he comes back and forth. Very vague memory, first of all, it was a couple of years ago, but also it was through a translator, so I'm not remembering. What I remember is the visceral emotion of this woman and the way that she felt this spirit, felt this experience of hers. That was sort of corresponded by an old man in the village, who I went with into his living room and sat down and talked to the fact that he believed his wife was coming back and that she hadn't been released from something. And it was all very hard to understand. And he was very emotional himself. That was the feeling like I had of it, that these were real feelings and these were real experiences for these people. And that whether or not they absolutely had proof that this was the way it was, this was how they were identifying things. And they felt it in their heart that this had happened. And you can see from that how this becomes more cultural than is necessarily paranormal. It's all side by side and very real and very authentic, So I find that fascinating, not only because we're talking about some possible entity that's floating out there, but it's also very interesting because it creates the layers of society that really fascinate me, that make every day kind of alive because people are thinking so hard about what's going on. So it was cool.
I've been to Romania 3 times, and it is truly a beautiful country and an amazing place to visit. But the supernatural element of their lives, it's fascinating because really it's not something they talk about openly. Obviously, everywhere you go, there are Dracula souvenirs to buy. But sure, when you get down and start talking to some of the locals, and they do open up to you, it's quite compelling to see the richness of their history, their concepts of where they've come from, what these elements mean to them, and then on top of it, then there's this speculation. And it's funny because they, as you said, they don't really refer to them as vampires. It's the strigoi, which is kind of a ghostly vampire, and it's just such literally a different world. And I'm always captivated by that when I visit Romania, because again, it's the 21st century, Don, and these people, it's not like they're backwards. It's not like they're stupid or ignorant. It's just that this is such a part of their culture. It makes you question, what are we overlooking? Because maybe we're just uncomfortable with what the truth might be.
I think it's very not simple. That's the wrong word for it. There's a very direct cause and effect here. When you live in a country like we do, that's pretty new, and it has a very strong knee-jerk reaction to pretty much everything. We come from the pioneer legend. We come from, I can go from here to there and make my life better. There's always new, right around the corner. When you are raised, especially in poverty, or at least in very simple conditions in those parts of the world, their knee-jerk is much more spiritual, much deeper, and much more thousands of years of this has gone before them. And the sense of going somewhere else isn't part of life. And so it's more generational, it's more layered.